This video is a quick review of strategies and devices as a follow-up to our previous video. Here we go. The first one is the 2017 FRQ from Booth Luce, wherein she is speaking to a group of journalists, and the argument that she's making, or rather the purpose of her speech, is to do two things. One, to encourage them to be better journalists while chastising them for not being good journalists right now. And what she means is that they're too sensational. The media has become so sensational. And this didn't happen last year. This happened in the 50s. So I just want you to remember that. So she begins by defining journalism, right? This is the strategy of definition that we're looking at here. So the first one is, for what is good journalism all about? On a working, finite level, it is the effort to achieve the illuminating candor in print, to strip away cant. It is the effort to do this not only in matters of state, diplomacy, and politics, but also in every smaller aspects of life that touches the public interest or engages proper public curiosity. It is the effort to explain everything from a summit conference to why the moon looks larger coming over the horizon than it does, so on and so forth, right? It is the effort to do this and to do that. Familiar behavior and unfamiliar. It is to use the big word. Here it is, the pursuit of and the effort to stay the truth. So the definition is complete. What is good journalism about? Tell the truth. There it is. Done. But while the strategy is cohesive, right? It is complete in this paragraph. We can see that the strategy is about definition, right? Because she's defining what, if she's going to tell them that they're not being good journalists, then she has to explain what that means. So she defines. So while the definition works here, the devices are really what sell the strategy altogether. So let's look at some of the devices that are present here throughout. So the first one, there's a repetition, right? What is good journalism about? It is the efforts. There it is. It is the effort to achieve illuminating candor. It is the efforts to do this not only in matters of state and diplomacy. It is the effort to explain everything from a summit, right? And one more time, it is the efforts, so on and so forth. And then the very last one, and this one we'll save for later, but it is to use the big word, say the truth. So this repetition all the way through has a very I have a dream quality to it, and we'll call this an anaphora. So here's one device, right? Anaphora is the repetition of a word or phrase for the sake of emphasis, and here you have it, right? She is repeating to answer what is good journalism about. I'll tell you what it is. It is to do this. It is to do that. It's to do this and do that, right? So this repetition contributes to the strategy because she is defining, but also together the strategy contributes to the purpose, which is, I want you to be better journalists. That's my purpose. But you're not acting like so. So I will give you extensive definitions so as to bring you closer to what I believe is good journalism, right? So this is one device within it, in an anaphora. Now, let's look at other devices here. And this one is a little more subtle, but I like it a lot. I think this one is, you can chalk it up to diction, right? You can say that this is about the diction altogether, and you'll be right. But what I like about this one, this device, is that is in stark contrast to other things. So this one is about juxtaposition. So look at these words. It is the effort to achieve illuminating candor. Look at that phrase, illuminating candor, right? Strip away cant. And this is not missing the apostrophe. The cant is a word. It means sanctimonious or hypocritical talk, right? So she's saying, what is good journalism? Well, on a working finite level, on the smallest way we can think about it, maybe even practically, it is to do away with all that talk, all that garbage talk, all that talk that doesn't accomplish anything of value, of meaning, right? All that insignificant talk, and to shine a light of truth, right? Illuminating candor, honesty, sincerity. That's interesting. It's an interesting language. And it's not the first time that she uses something like this, right? She later uses the word idiosyncrasy, right? And I think her control of diction here is important because what she's doing is she is peppering the passage with very interesting, um, very high caliber words or high caliber definitions or high caliber um, ideas to then deflate those ideas, right? Here's the device of juxtaposition. She is establishing all of these words, and there's more here, there's more. Uh, Engaging the proper public curiosity. This is interesting because proper public, remember that she's saying that the news is too sensational, right? That they care less about telling the truth and more about selling paper. So, so they have to appeal to the baser qualities of people. So that's why she includes proper here, right? And then there is that strange reference about why the moon looks larger coming over the horizon, right? But the use of these phrases, which are so interesting, is to be then undermined or rather deflated, right? Because she's saying, what is good journalism? And remember that she's attempting to define journalism to a group of journalists. So they know what it is. You can't tell me what it is. So she's elevating her language, right? Her diction becomes more attractive, more imagery dipped. So illuminating candor, boom, stripping away cant. So she's elevating her language with words like idiosyncrasies, right? With phrases like proper public curiosity. So she's elevating her diction in order to appeal to her audience because she wants to establish an ethos. Like, I know what this is. But then, all of these examples of elevated diction, which again can be dipped in imagery um, and work as an appeal to the audience through ethos, all of these are then undermined, right? Because they are juxtaposed to one word, truth. It is to use the big word, big word after she just dropped idiosyncrasies, right? To use the big word, truth. You imagine how this would read without all of this, right? What is good journalism about? It is the effort to say the truth. I mean, any journalist would look at it and say, yeah, duh, right? They would not be impressed. But after a repetition of definitions, it is, right? And an aphora. After using diction that is attractive and it uses imagery like illuminating candor and stripping away cant, there's a kind of like take off and put on, right? And using words like idiosyncrasies. So all of these, they work as a juxtaposition and they juxtapose. It's cooler this way. And they juxtapose um, all of this elevated language with one big simple idea, truth. Now, bonus points. Why is this cool? Why does this matter? Well, because that's what she's saying. She's saying good journalism is about telling the truth. And all of you, she's criticizing, remember, all of you are about sensationalizing everything. You sensationalize everything. You don't tell me the truth as it is. So, because you sensationalize everything, then I will show you. It is about doing this and doing that. I am going to blow up my definition. And then I'm going to undermine my definition to show you that really what really matters is truth. Telling the truth. That's it. That's all I want to know. Right? This is a great example. Let's move on to the next one. All right. This is the Banneker letter. He writes a letter to Thomas Jefferson arguing against slavery. And part of his argument here is to tell Jefferson, you are a hypocrite. But he has to be careful in the way he says it. Right? So let's look at the way this strategy works. Sir, suffer me now to recall to your mind the time in which the arms and tyranny of the British crown were exerted with every powerful effort in order to reduce you to a state of servitude. Look back, I entreat you, on the variety of dangers to which you were exposed. Reflect on a time in which every human aid appeared unavailable, in which every hope, even hope and fortitude, wore the aspect of inability in the conflict, that you cannot but be led to a serious and grateful sense of your miraculous and providential preservation. You cannot but acknowledge that the present freedom and tranquility which you enjoy have mercifully received, and that is the peculiar blessing of heaven. This, sir, was a time when you clearly saw into the injustice of a state of slavery. Okay. Now, this whole section, he is comparing Jefferson's experience, or rather the people at the time, right? Their experience by being servants to the British crown, right? To the experience of slavery. Banneker is a former slave. So, why is he doing this? Well, he's trying to argue against slavery. So he has to say, you don't you didn't like it? Well, we don't like it, right? That's the comparison being made here. But there are devices in between that bolster this strategy. So let's look at them right now. Here's one. So the repetition, this comes up a lot, but the repetition of this idea is very interesting. You can't just say what it is, you got to tell me what it's doing. So recall to your mind, right? Look back, he says. I entreat you in a variety of dangers. Reflect on. And I think that's it, right? There are three of these: recall, look back, reflect. Now, this very simply, we can just say that this is parallelism, right? He is paralleling the idea of remember the state of servitude, and now look at here, right? But this also works in many ways. Number one, he's saying, look at your own history. He's establishing a connection. Look at your history. Wow, that's supposed to be the word history. Look at the word history, right? So look at your own history, and then look at our present, which is the point. That's why he's paralleling these ideas. Look at your history, look at our present. Look at what you went through, look at what we're going through, right? Now, why does this work too? It's an interesting connection of words here if you really think about it. It's recall, a passive remembrance. Look back, which seems more physical. It has the impression of turn around, right? And reflect. Every time he uses the same phrase, the same idea paralleled all the way through, he's changing the definition little by little. It's not just recall passively. It's not just look back physically. Reflect is about engage your mental faculties, right? So here you can make the argument that he's telling Jefferson, really, really, because if he would have done it one time, here's why one time doesn't work. If he says, recall to your mind the time in which the arms and the tyranny of the British crown were exerted with every power effort. Remember when this happened to you. You didn't like it, right? Well, I don't like it either. But using it one time doesn't have the same effect. Using it three times, however, has the effect that he wants, which is Jefferson, pay attention, look at the issue, right? Look at your past. This is our present. Jefferson, pay attention. So, but not only does he accomplish that through the parallelism, right, in the threes, but he's also, right, he's also accomplishing something else. He's also changing the definition as he goes through. It's not just remember passively. It's think about, analyze, reflect, really spend time with it. So he says, if you do this, here's another format, right? If, and this is an appeal to pathos, to Jefferson's own morality. If you remember, you cannot but be led to a series in grateful sense of miraculous. You cannot, here's another repetition, right? Acknowledge that the present freedom and tranquility which you enjoy was a gift from heaven. So he's saying, if, then. That's what he's saying here. Now, why does this work? Why does this work? Well, what works here is, as an overall strategy of comparison, comparing Jefferson's own state of servitude, well, quote unquote, right, to the British crown, to the state of slavery that Banneker and others are suffering, or although Banneker is a freed slave at this point, he is establishing this comparison. That's the strategy. But the devices of parallelism, paralleling the idea that his own experience could be a contrast to Banneker's own experience, and also demanding that if you do this, you must come to this conclusion. This is a pathos appeal, right? No strategy, no device, no nothing within a text is ever without an appeal. They always appeal in some way through a kind of appeal. I mean, that's just the way it is. You cannot in any other way. If you want to say that he's establishing ethos by saying that, reminding, well, he does, not here, but he does in the whole text. He reminds Jefferson of the history of the Declaration of Independence, which is in a way an establishment of ethos. Why? Because I know who you are, and I know what happened. Now here's why I think that you saying that all men are created equal and yet I'm not is hypocritical, right? That's an example. So there's always an appeal happening in the text. There's never a text without an appeal. That just doesn't happen, right? Every time a person communicates an idea from one person to another, it's always in an appealing way. They have to appeal in some way, through something. Now, I think there is a repetition of the word sir here, which doesn't become apparent here, but it will become apparent when you read the whole text. It's, sir, I entreat you to look back. And then later on, this, sir. And you don't see it as important right now because it's only a portion of the text, but the entirety of the text, he repeats sir. And sir, that small word, begins as an example of deference to authority and respect. And by the end, it becomes so demanding, so angry. It grows from sir to sir. And that's incredible to me. I mean, it's an incredible use of diction where Banneker is able to become more indignant as the text continues. So this is not an example that really applies to this only one passage, but this is the beginning of it. So this would be an example of diction. And now his control of the word sir becomes more indignant all the way through. Right? Now, I suppose we can use here the allusion. We can talk about the allusion that is happening here to heaven. It's only the beginning, but later on he will allude to God and Christian elements. So this is something that you might want to pay attention to, right? And this is something that you could see. You could see a portion of a text and then see it in another another section of the full text, and then put it together. The key here is whether we're doing this one or this one. What we want to do is, or this one, which is the last one, what we want to do is remember that the text itself is giving you strategies and devices. The writers are using things in order to convey their purpose to the audience, right? So they pack things in it. So as long as you are able to recognize them and to explain what they're doing and how they are relating to the purpose of the writer, you are analyzing. That is analysis. When you tell me what a thing is doing in order to affect that other thing and how it's doing it. So that will be for another video. This is the Florence Kelley 2011 FRQ. So here she creates images. This one is more obvious. So boys and girls after their 14th birthday enjoy the pitiful privilege of working all night long. A little girl on her 13th birthday could start away from her home at 5:30 in the afternoon carrying her pail of midnight luncheon, as happier people carry their midday luncheon, and could work in the mill from 6 at night until 6 in the morning without violating any law of the Commonwealth. Well, Florence Kelley is arguing, obviously, against child labor. And she's using images. This is not only one example. There's many in that passage. In order to appeal to an audience, primarily through pathos, of all these children who are working in these awful conditions and how this is wrong. And the laws right now are negligent because they're allowing this to continue. Okay, so the images here are very, very clear. These are examples. Here are the images that we can see. You've got the boys and girls who, after their 14th birthday, right? It's very specific. Enjoy, and this is the phrase that I think is very interesting. Enjoy the pitiful privilege of working all night long. I mean, that's a satiric phrase if I ever saw one. And here's an example of how maybe some devices may not be important as others. So if you go back here, remember this one, providential preservation. You could say this is alliterative. You could say that this is an example of alliteration, but is it really useful? Is it really beneficial? Is it really doing anything to the text? Is it impactful? Do I look at providential preservation and I think, oh, wow, that's incredible? Maybe not. But this one, on the other hand, enjoying the pitiful privilege. Now, this is an example of alliteration, but it's an example of alliteration that is in stark contrast because it's pitiful privilege. This is also oxymoronic. These words don't go together, right? But they're also creating an image right? The image of working all night long as a kind of, at least I get to work and make a living, right? So it's an incredible phrase because it packs so many things within it. This is an example of devices that are more useful than, let's say, these, right? Okay. Then a little girl, and I think it's interesting that her fixation is always on a little girl. She's also a woman, but a little girl has an image of, I don't know, maybe as a thing of the time, or as a thing of every other time. But I think also, since part of her audience is not only women, it's also men, and I think little girl appeals very much to that audience, right? You have to be aware of what everything in the text is appealing to the audience in some way, specific audience in some specific way. So the little girl on her 13th birthday start away from home, right, at half past 5, and then carrying her lunch, happy, or rather, as happier people carry the midday lunch, right? So the implication is that she's not happy, and she could work in the mill from 6 at night until 6 in the morning, which is crazy, right? 12 hours, that's insane, without violating any law of the Commonwealth. And I think this is the very big irony, right? Now you could say that some examples here are, there is irony here, enjoy the pitiful privilege of working all night long, and irony here, where these people could work and nobody cares, so these people at least have the opportunity to work, which is crazy because if we provided for them, then they wouldn't find themselves in this situation to begin with. So there's irony in two, right? But within it, you can point out that pitiful privilege is oxymoronic, but only because it juxtaposes ideas of having the opportunity of to do a terrible thing, or a thing that is very difficult to do. And you can say that this entire text creates images that are very palpable, images that are very relatable, images that the reader can say, wow, right? Because the readers, or rather the audience here, are people, men and women who have boys and girls, right? Who have kids at 14 and 13 years of age, who have kids who may not work, or may work, but may not work. But still, the relationship of, I have a kid, and my kid may work, right? Having the pitiful privilege to work all night, right? So, here's an example of all three. These are the three examples that we've talked about. Now here's the follow-up activity. We'll talk about this on the chat, but I just want to make it quick. I want you to pick any FRQ that we haven't covered. You know which ones those are. I want you to identify a major strategy within it. It could be more than one if you want to, if it's becoming more cumbersome, if you think that it's too difficult to separate, because good texts are woven together, and it's hard to separate it so clear, so clean cut. I get it. I want you to highlight, point out, and explain how every device works within that larger strategy. Now, I don't want you to do this in a paragraph form. I don't want you to write a paragraph. What I want you to do is that I want you to put it in a document, right? So like, copy the text, put it in the middle. I saw some people cropping the image of the text. That works too, but copying the text may be better, might be easier, more functional. And then draw arrows out of it, or point it out in some way, right? I saw some people highlighting and then on the bottom telling me what the highlight means. That's okay too. Just tell me how the devices work. But I'm not really looking for a paragraph here. And I want you to submit it on the drive so I can make the next video. Okay? All right, good deal. Keep the annotations so that I can save it to you. Okay,